Hey, yo, what it did, y'all? Let's get right into it. So this reboot is probably less than 24 hours away when you're seeing this. And that means that you are definitely in panic mode if you're watching this video, or you're just curious to see what, maybe you missed something. You're thinking about what build am I going to actually log into? Maybe you're just curious to see about ideas for potentially a second character throughout the event. Who knows, right? Whatever it may be, I've got a list of skills and builds, air quotes, for you guys to think about choosing from as we go into the event, because you should either be looking to, ideally anyways, maybe play something new, or maybe you're just looking to play something that was strong this league that you didn't get to try out yet, or maybe it's a thing that you're scared is going to get nerfed. Cough, cough, a couple things regarding Trickster, right? There's a handful of options on this list as far as things to pick from, both things that you've seen and heard of before over the course of this league, or maybe even things that you just genuinely forgot about because it's been so long, right? Even just from the beginning of this league, that was 2 months ago, 3 months ago. It's been quite some time. Or, maybe it's been a league or two since the skills come up across your feed. And so it's cool to just have that reminder that I've got a lot of skills to talk about here, just because there's a lot of really good stuff in the game right now. And it's worth noting this list is so far from exhaustive, because if I really sat down and really thought about it, because I sat down and I thought about it, but I know if I push myself to the limits on it, I can provide you with well over 50 skill gems that are worth looking at right now, just because the game isn't that good of a spot in terms of build diversity and ability to clear most content in the game across a wide variety of skills, right? So, before we get into it, if you find this video particularly helpful or useful, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let's get into it. First thing on this list is Sanctum Runners. Premier Sanctum Runner, at least per softcore trade standards. I don't personally agree that it's the best. If you saw my Sanctum video, you know what I actually do think is number one, but number one in terms of trade play rate and all sorts of other factors, Hex Blast Mines is definitely the one. And it's usually played on a Trickster. You can also play it on a Cultist. There's also the Inquis version if you play it with Contradiction, but I find that to be just objectively weaker long term than the versions that play on Trickster or Cultist or even Assassin through just the regular gem, whether it be life scaling or through Shroud or through standard level scaling. A handful of different ways to scale this gem. It's extremely strong. It's very versatile, except for high speed mapping. Like, I wouldn't be in here like I'm trying to blast 60 dunes an hour on this build. This is the wrong build for that. We both know that this build is a really strong single target specialist that has decent mapping. It's good for progression mapping. It's good for progressing and getting your outlets done, but it's really meant for Sanctum and other types of bossing related content. So Sanctum or Essence farming, Rogue Exile farming strats, T17s early on, Uber bossing, right? That's what Hex Blast Mines is good for. And if you're interested in that type of content in this event, I mean, the better place to go for it than here. And of course, I have my own guide here on the channel for Hex Blast Mines Trickster. There's an occultist version by Travic that I actually that I've kind of fucked with. The Inquis version, I believe the best known one I can think of off the top of my head when I was preparing my notes for this is Lance's video talking about the Hexblaster Contradiction version, although I don't recommend that version personally just because it's slow. That's the only reason I really don't like it. I just think it's too slow. It's a very well put together character. It's just slow, and I hate that. But if that's your style, that's another way to look at it. Just Hex Blast Mines, really strong skill. Now, number 2 on my list, and the actual best Sanctum build, Penance Brand of Dissipation. If you're looking to do some Sanctum, I think this is the skill you should be playing on. I think on a variety of ascendancies, this skill just completely outclasses Hex Blast Mines in every way, except for literally maybe mapping. And that's just because Penance Brand is not a mapping skill, but you can always just play the character as something else and turn it into Penance Brand afterwards. Even, mapping on Stormbrand, for example, even though Stormbrand's damage is kind of buns, so don't do that. But generally speaking, the skill has incredibly high damage, like absurdly high damage, as well as incredible scalability, and by far the best quality of life out of all the Sanctum runners as well, given that it is a very set it and forget it type of playstyle with very little effect on your character speed whatsoever, because of the fact that it is one cast that just kind of kills everything for you. Scales very well with money. As far as ascendancies of choice, I would recommend Hyro if you're looking to rush into the Sanctum. If your goal is, I'm going to hit the campaign, I'm not even going to kill Katava, I'm just going to go start getting ready to do Sanctum, I would recommend Hierophant. If not that exact goal, I think Inquis and Elementalist are notably stronger ascendancies overall. And you could even turn the Hierophant version into an Inquis later on, or, then really deepening your progression Inquis with a Forbidden Flesh and Flame off of Hierophant to grab Sign of Purpose. That node is absolutely insane for this build. And so that's like how I would be going. That's not a purpose, my brand of conviction. The one that gives it the ridiculous activation frequency at the end of its lifetime, right? Like that really like puts it on the map. You can check out my video here on the channel for how I did it in BPL on the higher bit, and there's a number of guides and POBs and characters on PoE Ninja that you could definitely look at for other versions as well. Very, very strong skill for sure. One more Sanctum runner that I think I like to talk about this one in particular because of how well-rounded the character is overall, because he definitely could bleed into the other category, which is everything else, and that's Bama. Bama I recommend it specifically on Necro. There is a Guardian version. I'm not a fan of Guardian Bama at all. Like, if you want to play Elemental Bama, be my guest. You probably are still better off playing that on Necro as an aura stacking variant, rather than taking the inferior stat spread that Guardian gives you, but it is an option. Bama is an insanely strong skill, extremely high damage scaling, even after the bug fix over the course between 324 and 325, handling the way that the prismatic jewels combat focus worked with the Bama, like prismatic clones. Even without prismatic clones, people seem to have like forgotten that Bama was a premier bossing skill before prismatic clones came out. What put Bama on the map was actually this is a bombarding clones, because now it is a skill that also maps very well, and I do mean very well. Like, you need to figure out some things regarding the literal character speed department, but the actual reach, clear, and damage performance across the board is insane. Very, very strong character. It's also, minion character, so it comes with a lot of the amenities that minion characters come with, while still having very strong scaling because of other stats besides just percent minion damage and levels that you could scale to make the character stronger. Very, very strong character. Highly recommended for Sanctum, and I even recommend it for lots of mapping and even bossing content as well. Very, very chef's kiss of a build. Now, let's get into what I call the other category, right? In my notes, I wrote it down as mapping, because Sanctum characters and bossing characters are pretty synonymous outside of a ton of other recommendations that could also be put in there. But mapping also then becomes synonymous with a lot of other things as well, because it's not always just exclusively mapping, right? For example, number one on this list is, of course, Lightning Strike. And Lightning Strike is not exclusively a mapping character, right? We've seen Lightning Strike Slayer or Warden for high-speed mapping. Slayer if you want to be a little bit beefier to get into T17s. But then there's even the Trickster version of Slayer with Ephemeral Edge that dominated the gauntlet, right? As a premier bosser because of how tanky it was. Granted, I don't know if you need to be that tanky in softcore trade during this event, but like, if that's your style, that's your style, right? Get into it. Lightning Strike, premier skill. Highly recommend it. I will say that if you're not playing the Ephemeral Edge version, I do recommend Slayer over Warden. Just from a overall character value perspective. That said, if I played it myself, I would play it on a Warden, but that's because I am in love with Hoarfrost as a mechanic, which I might, talk about my love for that node at a different point in time in the future, right? But just know, Lightning Strike, you can't go wrong. Another character you can't go wrong with is the Power Siphon Locust Mines character. Come on. If we want to talk about insane things involving a Trickster, this has definitely got to be up there alongside Hexblast Mines. It's not nearly as high in the single target department as Hexblast Mines are, but it is an incredibly smooth starter. I recently did it in my No Magic Rare League, where I just kind of like put it on the second I had the ability to, and it just it fucked on the game, quite frankly. Even with terrible gear for quite some time, it does some incredible damage and progression. It's a very comfy mapping character. It's a very comfy like progression bossing character. It covers a lot of the bases that I wanted the character to cover. The only reason actually it's not higher up on my list and even like in the Sanctum category is the damage does not get as high as a like Hexblast Miner or any of the other Sanctum runs. But more importantly, actually, is mechanically speaking, the interaction with Locust Mines is a little awkward. Just the getting used to the maximum range thing is going to take you some time. And it also just does not feel particularly good in Sanctum. So that's why it's not like in the Sanctum category, but it is a fantastic mapping character that can then transition into that Lightning Strike Trickster that I mentioned earlier, right? Really, really strong thing there. Next up on the list, slams. They were like definitely the talk of the town going into the league with the massive overhaul of melee stuff, including supports and war cries, supports such as overexertion and just war cries in general. It got a lot stronger, and so we have to talk about slams. And I have it in my notes that literally just says any of them really. And I fully agree with this statement. Now, granted, you will get a lot more bang for your buck on certain ones compared to other ones, but like slams as a whole are really strong. My recommendation for progression is, of course, Earth Shatter. It is just the highest damage of the slams and also still has really good AoE. And the reason that I would even consider playing it, quite frankly, because even with this being true, like it's always been, Earth Shatter has been a decent skill for quite some time. I never really liked it because I didn't like the forced additional button to get it to detonate, much like why so many people were not a fan of miners before the addition of automation support. Now we have access to auto war cry, or not auto exertion. Yeah, there's now auto exertion support instead of automation. Auto exertion, what auto arms got turned into. You can now automatically war cry off the spikes, and that feels incredible. You can even like put like just general's cry in there. It'll do nothing in terms of exerts for you, but just having that really short CD detonation on your Earth Shatter for smooth, consistent mapping has been reported to feel incredible by many people. And then you can transition the character from Earth Shatter into like Volcanic Fissure or Snaking, which is one of my personal favorite skills in the game, quite frankly, for incredibly smooth mapping and still really, really competitive bossing performance. You can also play, Earthquake, Ground Slam, etc. But these are just, like I said, slams, blanket category. Maybe even Conk Path if you're feeling it. Next up, I can't talk about mapping mapping characters, especially in a league where, mapping with just drops from monsters killed per hour with the lantern is in play. I can't talk about mapping if I don't talk about bow characters. Specifically going to recommend Elemental Hit of the Spectrum here. Definitely on a Deadeye. If you're feeling frisky, you can put it on a Warden. Both versions are very strong. Flubgun has a very strong Deadeye version. Snoob, I believe, is who has the really strong Warden version. Very, very strong build across the board. It is squishy. If you hate being squishy, it's not the build for you. But if you like zooming around and blowing shit up, definitely a build for you. Very smooth, very fast mapper. One of my favorite characters all time, quite frankly. Granted, I'm a bigger fan of other bow skills in particular, but just the general archetype of bow blaster, chef's kiss. And the Recombinator being in the game makes it super easy to get your hands on some really nicely crafted bows early on, especially now that compared to the beginning of the league, we actually have the methods for quickly getting our towns up to snuff and actually having the dust that we need in order to recom weapons in there and get us a nice bow, right? Highly recommend. Next, Holy Relic of Conviction. I can't believe that this league, Holy Relic of Conviction, is just kind of like flew under the radar for everyone. I'm going to put this back on your map real quick. Now, I will say, I don't know if I recommend directly starting it. Like, obviously, it's a lab gem, so you have to get it first. And then, there's some stuff about maybe some CDR scaling and whatnot. But if anyone ever told you that you have to have Diala's Enhance and Ashes in order to make this skill playable, they are just flat out lying to you. This skill is incredible, even without all that stuff. And it's one of the best clearing minion skills in the game. There's a couple things that stand out to me a little bit higher in the clear speed department, but they usually lack in the single target department or just in the general feel of play / putting together part. One of the major reasons that I should recommend this build, it's so highly relative to other minion builds, is that it has the ability to actually sustain itself. So, a character like Bama or other minion characters usually have to rely on stuff like regeneration, recoup, or in the cases of like ES characters or characters with a little bit of ES, you might get like ES recharge, or there's the stuff with the bone barrier leech from minions to you. Like, all of that works, but I really like that on a character like Holy Relic of Conviction, since you are running a weapon that you are actively attacking with, right? You're actively using Lancing Steel of Spraying to trigger. You get to just put life gain on hit in your character and have an absurd amount of active recovery alongside any passive recovery you have. Very, very strong. Huge fan. Highly recommend. Play it on a Necro, not a Guardian. The poison version is just better. I promise you. I promise you. Trust me on this. Next up, Mana Man, the classic Hierophant. I hate that this archetype still exists, honestly. Not that I don't want to see it survive. It's just one of those things where it's like, it's kind of boring having to talk about Mana Man when I talk about strong builds, because I don't think you can really play mana on anything else besides Hierophant. Not that it's unviable, but just that you are massively throwing away a lot of the value that Hierophant brings as an ascendancy to this archetype, including the extra survivability, the AoE scaling off of your mana, the ability to scale ES through it. There are just things that that ascendancy brings that you can't really get elsewhere, and you just kind of have to cope. It is really, really strong though. There are 3 major ways that you can be playing it. especially like in leveling, you'll often play it as Firestorm, and then you'll move into either Frostbolt Ice Nova, or you'll move it into Ball Lightning. I will say that Firestorm is better single target than both of them. If you're really interested in a single target version of this character, play Archmage Firestorm of Pelting. Very, very high single target with none of the mapping benefits whatsoever. So keep that in mind. You will need to find a solution for your mapping if you play it that way. Ball Lightning of Orbiting is like a pretty decently popular way to play it if you want to have better visual clarity than Frostbolt Ice Nova. But I do find the build to just be inferior to Frostbolt Ice Nova in borderline every way except for single target damage. And even the difference in single target is not actually all that big. Frostbolt Ice Nova is definitely like the recommended and most popular way to play it, because even though it is a 2-button setup until you have, say, like Katawa's Thirst in your setup to make your life a little bit comfier, the AoE that it covers and the raw damage it outputs is extremely high. One downside for this archetype as a whole is that it is a little squishy, as it is kind of difficult to fit in good layers of mitigation outside of just your endurance charges when you are in a setup that needs to have life/ES and mana and actual damage scaling. It kind of sort of messes up a little bit, and you end up playing really, you're very thin when your Arcane Cloak is down, but when your Arcane Cloak is up, you are very nice and bulky. And so it's like it's a weird dynamic that you'll just have to get used to, but it is a very, very good playstyle, all things considered. And then I should shout out Bleed/Retaliation Gladiators, even though personally I don't like the archetype that much, and I would personally not really play it in its current state just because it's all got moved to melee, and I don't think any of the melee bleed skills feel particularly good. I think I would be remiss to not at least shout out Eviscerate in particular. I do not think that highly of non-retaliation bleed gladiators. I think if you're going to play Bleed Glide, you should be playing with retail skills, at least one, maybe even two of them. Last Rite of Hemorrhaging is fine for like getting your pure single target up, but the actual mapping of that skill is abysmal. Eviscerate completely clears it, especially paired with like Crushing Fist for when Eviscerate can't be casted. Like the playstyle looks comfy. I'm just not a fan of the retail playstyle, so I wouldn't like personally play it. But if you're into that, hey, look, more power to you, right? Now, that's all the skills that I had like good recommendations for in detail. Now, thank you for making it this far in the video though, because I've got bonus stuff for you. I've just got a list of skills that I'm going to kind of like rattle off to you, right? I'll provide a little bit of additional context here and there as I think it's if I think it's necessary at all, but just to give you other things to think about. If you're sitting here like, oh my God, dude, I expected you to give me some sauce. Don't worry, bro. I got some sauce. I just had to pad out the first 15 minutes or so of the video with stuff that people would actually respect and listen to get you this far, right? Because I guess people don't want to hear about the actually cool things that you can play in the game. Now, let's talk about some cool shit. It's worth noting, some of these things here are highly experimental. Like, I'm mostly putting ideas out. These do not come with POBs. They are just search queries for you to see if you can find somebody on PoE Ninja that's done it that you might want to copy, or if there's a video about it that I probably saw and got the idea from, or a friend of mine gave me the idea a while ago and we POB'd it out. Maybe they tested it and it turned out to work out really well, right? These are more experimental things that are just really strong from either the numbers or from other people testing it that you're not going to see be super popular. But remember, popularity is not a measure of viability. Keep that in mind. Now, number one on the list of things in the bonus skills though is extremely viable. Viper Strike of the Mamba, very strong skill. It's a very interesting way to scale poison, very comfy play style. Also makes use of an Alchemist Mark, which I think is really cool because that gem is just woefully underutilized as a whole, and you would play that on Pathfinder. Icicle Mines, one of my favorite skills all time. If you were with me a couple leagues ago, you know there's a period where I played Icicle Mines 3 times in the same league because I love the skill just that much. I've played it many times as Trickster, many times as Deadeye, many times as Assassin as well. I think it's strong on all 3 ascendancies. Which one you pick is up to you. I usually use it for Sanctum or for bossing content. It's also a good mapper, which is why I liked it, which is why I like it. It's a much stronger mapper than say like Hex Blast Mines, but obviously lower single target. So help balance that out, right? BV has not gone anywhere. Don't ever let anyone tell you that BV is dead. You might have to transition into it, or accept that your start might be a little bit slower and a little bit more reliant on farming of gear, but BV is still here. It's still here to blast. If you're playing BV, I do recommend cold conversion on a cultist. I do think also fire conversion is in a pretty good spot. I wouldn't do lightning conversion. I think pure fizz is kind of suffering at the moment outside of like impale shenanigans that I just don't think are worth talking about at the moment. But you know, hey, look, is what it is. Check that shit out. Spark still pretty solid, although that's more of a I love Spark thing. I just if you're a Spark enjoyer, I just wanted to give you hope in the fact that Spark is actually still fine. It's just a little bit higher on the investment to get it to the feel that we all know and love. Summon Zombie of Falling, and this is actually an archetypal thing, but I call out specifically Summon Zombie of Falling because I remember seeing a build for this the archetype of the Recaller on Saboteur, using specifically Summon Zombie of Falling, and I thought it was really funny the way that it made use of the recall repeating the, you know, trigger Arcanist brand to repeat it, or trigger brand recall to repeatedly recall the same skill over and over, as well as paired with fresh meat because technically it counts as summoning a minion that then doesn't actually have an accuracy check. It was a really cool concept that I just felt like was worth talking about again. But don't forget that there's also, you know, BB of unloading or armor brand of recalling of a recall that are both also in this archetype of recall or saboteur. I shot a penetration. Shout out to Arrow for this one. I definitely did not come up with this idea myself at all. He was definitely the first person I saw actually play the skill. It's very much in the same vein as why Power Siphon Locust Mines got really strong. And he actually said it in a recent video of his that there's a non-zero chance that, much like how Power Siphon Locust Mines got popular, that this could like follow the same trend as just turning a beloved skill that is actually really strong but has a particularly annoying weakness into the Locust Mine setup to get rid of it. That one particular weakness has proven to be really strong for both, you know, PS Locust Mine, as I mentioned earlier, but now I shot a penetration. Definitely check that character out. It's a really cool idea and it's actually really strong. Here's a cook that I actually know works. It's just going to sound weird when I say it to you. Crit Bleed Warden. Yeah, let that sink in for a second. Technically can be done as Ignite as well, but I think Bleed is a little bit better. And technically can also be done as Poison. But I'm mentioning Bleed in particular because Bleed Bow is one of my favorite archetypes of all time. And when I saw that Glad was getting a rework, I was actually really excited to see if, you know, Bleed Bow Glad would have been strong in this league. And it was actually my plan started for 325 before Glad's rework completely shot that idea in the foot. And we didn't have enough information about tinctures ahead of the league for me to test out whether or not Bleed Bow Warden would work. And a friend of mine came to me with the idea, showed me the character, we POB'd it up. It is an insane concept in terms of getting the damage put together, but it is so strong. Guys, tinctures are so broken. Like, I know we know that tinctures are strong, but like, do you really know how strong tinctures are? Trust me, it's a really funny idea. If you want to like chop it up at some point in the comments or something, let me know. Like, I will like expose you to the beauty of this idea. Next up, deck stacking Spectral Throw, which Spectral Throw in a lot of ways is just going to get overshadowed by Lightning Strike, but I feel like it's just worth putting in your mind in case you want a skill that feels a little differently or a different way to scale. Deck stacking Spectral Throw is in a really good spot. A friend of mine reminded me of this a couple of leagues ago when he absolutely slammed the game on deck stacking Spectral Throw. Next up, Siege Ballista. Specifically like deck stacking in there as well, thinking like Iron Commander setup. That shit has been strong for so long that I'm just going to continually, I'm going to bring it up like once a league until people catch on to the fact that Siege Ballista is really strong. I'm just going to keep doing it. It is just like a good skill. I can't really say anything else about it. Stormburst Totems. If you're a fan of totems, this is probably the totem I recommend the most. You can also play Shockwave Totem, but I think I recommend Stormburst over Shockwave at the moment. But you know, that's if you're just like a hardcore spell totem fan. Shout out to Toddy if you're watching, right? Like, if you're a hardcore totem fan, you know, there's an option for you, but otherwise, you know what I mean? Tornado of Elemental Turbulence, just a really cool skill. It's not insanely strong or anything. It's just really cool. You can play it on Inquiz and go crazy, right? Infernal Blow. If you were watching my channel at the start of the league, you know that this league started an Infernal Blow Ignite on an Elementalist. They did a lot more damage than it really had any business doing, and I didn't even do the character right, quite frankly. If I ever redo that character, it's going to be so much stronger than it ended up being because I figured out how to get suppression on it and, like, you know, almost double its damage and whatnot. Like, it was one of those things where we just I had a hackneyed idea put together because I thought it was a really funny concept that I had always wanted to try. And I did try back in Tota that ended up turning out to be way better this league. And so I feel like, you know, I'll just put it in here for some of you to think about. Infernal is also really strong as a hit build, by the way. Like, it is a really strong, just generic strike. It does not have to be played as Ignite at all. It is just good. Keep that in mind. Couple more skills. Ice Spear, potentially Ice Spear splitting. Either one is fine. I just like to shout out Ice Spear every once in a while because I think the skill is still really good, and emphasis on still. It never stopped being good. It just fades in and out of people's memory as like cast on crit and other trigger based setups are like come and go. Never forget that this skill exists. It's still good. Then we've got Lightning Trap of Sparking. This is one you might not have really heard much about, but it's a skill that I've been cooking on for quite some time now. It is a very well performing skill. It has some light problems just in being a trap, in the sense that I think that traps are kind of weak right now, which is going to be in the theme with the next thing that I say as well. Not in the sense that they can't perform, but in the sense that traps and mines are so close to each other in playstyle right now that it's hard for me to justify playing trappers with how strong miners are. But Lightning Trap of Sparking is a really cool skill we're playing around with, and I just like the way that the projectiles like fly and whatnot with it. And last on my list of bonus skills, Explosive Trap. This, Explosive Trap tricks, if you're familiar with Fearless Dumbo's videos. Very good build, very good skill. Has very nice clear if you use Explosive Trap of Shrapnel, even after the nerfs. And then, regular Explosive Trap completely annihilates bosses. It's beautiful. All right, so anyways, I just rounded off way too many skills to y'all. And remember, I told you, this might not even be half my bag, if I'm being honest. The diversity is deep. I just wanted to give y'all some ideas for things that you can play going into the event in case you're just indecisive at the moment, or maybe again, you're just outsourcing more ideas for potential characters later on down the league. We still have roughly a month before PoE 2 early access hits, and God knows how long until the actual release of 326. So plenty of time to play a lot of these characters. I just wanted to put these ideas out there before the reboot started. If you guys enjoyed this video, the support would be much appreciated. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you want to see me playing live when the event starts, I will be streaming on Twitch. That link is in the description down below. I cannot guarantee it's over here. I know I mentioned it in a community post recently, but I have not gotten the dual streaming thing figured out yet. And so it might not be over here. You might just have to go to Twitch just to see what's going on. There's also a Discord in the description if you want to come chop it up. All links in the description. You know the deal. My challenge to you, right before we get out of here, is for you to drop me some cook. Right? You don't have to play the cook necessarily. Maybe you're scared to start the cook. Maybe you need to get some money for the cook, but drop some cook in the comments. I just like to see people cook, and it'll let me know that you made it this far in the video, and then I can give you extra love for being able to actually listen to me talk for this long, right? We've been in here talking about builds for a long time, so I deeply appreciate it. I'm going to catch you guys in the next one. See you guys later. Peace.